The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this virtual roundtable webinar focused on candidate preparation for the Placement Exchange 2016 in Indianapolis. Today's topic is on how to flourish at TPE, and we have three dynamic, experienced professional student affairs practitioners who are going to share their insights on how to do just that, flourish at TPE. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, a few housekeeping items though. Please feel free to tweet using hashtag TPE 2016. If you hear something you would like to share, we always encourage that. If you have questions that you would like to ask, please submit them via the question panel or pane on the GoToWebinar dashboard that you have on your screen, and we will get to those questions after we complete our prepared questions. We will attempt to answer questions until we reach the end of our 1 hour scheduled time for this webinar. Please be sure that you are all on mute during the webinar so that we can avoid any unnecessary background noise or chatter, and you can do that by pressing the microphone symbol on the dashboard if you aren't already in mute. I believe all of you are, so thank you very much for that. First, my name is Chris Mcdonald, and I serve as the Executive Director for University Housing at Georgia Southern University. I'm also a member of the TPE Coordinating Committee and responsible for educational resources. It's my pleasure to serve TPE and all of you in that endeavor. And I'd like to go ahead and ask our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves, introduce themselves, where they're from, their institution, maybe what they do, and a little bit about their experience with the Placement Exchange.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Anne-Marie Klotz. I'm the Dean for Campus Life at the New York Institute of Technology. I've been involved with TPE for a long time as a recruiter and one time as a candidate, and so happy to have all of you here today on our webinar.
And my name is Chris Bruno. I'm the Director of Housing Operations at Kennesaw State University, and I as well have attended 5 or 6 TPEs now on the recruiting side. And haven't been through it as a candidate, but I did go through ACPA when I was coming out of graduate school, so excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Mary Elliot. I work at Colorado School of Mines as the Associate Director of Residence Life and Housing, and just very similar to the other panelists, I've been a recruiter for many years and have gone through TPE myself as a mid-level, but also ACPA was where I did my first job search before TPE existed.
And that's okay. We won't cut off the webinar because you mentioned ACPA, because we believe in mutual support whenever possible. Thank you all again for being here and for taking your time to share your expertise with our potential candidates. We do have some prepared questions. That first question being, what advice do you have for candidates to best manage their time while at TPE?
Great. I'm going to get us started, and then I would invite the other panelists to jump on in if they have anything additional to add. The first thing that I want you to remember is that time is your currency. Time is your currency. So at TPE, you need to figure out how you're going to be able to maximize your time in the best possible way. So a few quick tips. Number one, when you're booking your interviews, make sure that you don't book them any more frequently than once an hour. Meaning, if you have a 9 a.m. Interview that may go till 9:30, don't book a 9:30. Book a 10 or a 10:30. You're going to definitely want that break, whether it is to just go grab a snack, write out a thank you note, I don't know, go chat with a friend, kind of decompress. It's important to be able to give you a little bit of that downtime. Secondly, it's all about the preparation. What homework are you doing before? I would make a file folder, a hard copy file folder of every school that you're interviewing with. Have information about the mission, the vision, their website, their student profile. Put all of that in the folder so it's easy to access. I would also say make sure that you are checking out their online newspapers. Almost every school has a weekly or a daily newspaper, and it gives you great insight into what's actually happening at the school now. And so you don't want to spend your whole time at TPE researching. You want the research part to have been done. And that file folder will really give you a snapshot of each school. And then finally, my suggestion would be to make sure you have your packing list, and every day before you head out the door, you have everything on your list with you. Your water bottle, your Advil, Band-Aids, snacks, food, things like that. It will make it so much easier if you sort of idiot-proof your day by ensuring that you have a packing list.
Good call on the list. The only thing I would add is know yourself. Like check check yourself in terms of when are you at your best. I am always better in the morning in terms of how articulate I sound and how, again, the idiot-proof thing, getting myself together in the morning, those sorts of things. So know yourself. If you want to plan more interviews for a time when you feel like you're going to be at your best, then do that, and don't worry if, like, you're in charge of your own schedule, so plan those times for as well as you can when you know you can be at your best.
That's all great advice, and I think the only thing I would add is be strategic with how you're setting up your interview times. If if you have time to take a snack break, like Anne-Marie said, make sure to bring a packing list. Bring snacks with you if you're not staying at the on-site hotel. And then from the candidate perspective, I've seen several candidates over the years who try to pop as many interviews in as they can at TPE, and they're doing 18 interviews a day, and at the end of the day they're exhausted. And so just be smart with your time. Like Anne-Marie said, it's your currency. That was great advice. And so just make sure you're not overextending yourself for the fear of not finding a job through TPE. Everybody will get a job. It's kind of like Oprah's favorite thing show. Everybody's going to get a job. So don't stretch yourself too thin.
Well, thank you all for that. I would only also add, this is not a competition. For those of you that have strong cohorts of different programs or colleagues, don't put yourself through the comparison game. Don't think that if you have 4 and they have 8 that they're winning. Don't put yourself through that stress. There's enough stress to manage, and allow yourself the opportunity to explore your own search and individualize it as best you possibly can. That's kind of a segue into the next question, which is how can a candidate best manage their own stress, their stressors, while at TPE?
And this is Mary. I'm going to get us started on this question. And that was a great segue, because my first point is control what you can. So just like Anne-Marie said, that packing list, your sleep, what you're eating, your own kind of level of what you're bringing every day, that's what you can control. Everything else and everyone else you cannot. So resist that urge to compare yourself to others. It's unproductive and you can't control it. So control the things you can. Everything else you'll deal with as it comes. That's how we do things in our profession. But the things you can control, make sure you have those under control. So in terms of managing stress, goes very similarly with the time. Manage it, plan for as much as you can ahead of your trip to TPE. Make sure you're organized. Even if you are not one of those people who's super organized or consider yourself super organized, force yourself in this mode to make sure that you have every single one of those, just like Anne-Marie said, a folder for everyone, that sort of thing. That will help you control your own anxiety, your own stress level, because you'll feel confident going into that. Confidence stands out when you're interviewing. It really does. And so you have every reason to be confident. You're coming from programs, you're coming from experiences that will help you to get jobs at the places that are the right fit. So make sure that you control the things you can, and that will lead to more confidence. My last little piece is consider TPE an opportunity. That's what it is. It's a great opportunity for building relationships. It's a great opportunity for meeting people. It's a great opportunity to hone your skills of A, organization, and B, speaking about yourself and your own experiences and what those bring to make you a really good candidate. So the comparison thing is the biggest pitfall that I see people get into, and it can add more anxiety to you than it's ever worth. So it's the least productive thing you can do for yourself, so don't worry about anybody else.
Yeah, those are great points. A couple of things I would add to that is to remember that you're only in charge of your locus of control, but that's still pretty big. So for me, I know that I'm going to do my best when I have consistency, meaning can I consistently get the same amount of sleep? Am I eating the things that I want to eat that are good for me? Am I getting some time to dedicate to my own wellness? Whatever that means for you, you're in charge of that locus of control. So if you're not a late night person, but yet your group of friends at TPE or your cohort wants to hang out late, don't do it. Think about what's going to help you be your very best self. Also keep in mind that in the triangle of student affairs jobs, there are the most at this sort of entry level and then at mid-level. And so the odds are good that you are going to find a really great fit for you. And so I think just kind of knowing that there's room in the sandbox for everybody and that you will find a really great fit. I think you also have to remember that whatever your first choice school is going into TPE will probably not be your first choice school coming out of TPE, and that's okay. And finally, just give yourself permission to understand this is a stressful process and be gentle with yourself. It's a job search process. It's not the end of the world. It's not the make or break. All of you will be gainfully employed.
Great, thank you very much. Next question. How can a candidate best manage their finances while at TPE?
This is Chris here. I'm going to get us started on this one. And this is a tough one because, in graduate school or if you're in your first full-time job or you're a mid-level manager, everybody's going to be at a different place budget-wise. They're going to have a different level of income. And like Chris said at the first question, it's hard not to compare yourself to your fellow job searchers and to see what they're wearing and what they're eating. And it's hard not to compare yourself. But I looked at this from three angles. You have costs all along the way, and the job search process is an investment in your future. So every dollar that you're spending is an investment in yourself, but you want to make sure that you're spending those dollars wisely. And so I broke it down into pre-interview, on-site, and post-interview. You're going to have expenses in those three categories. And the pre-interview costs it's going to be buying clothing for the conference, buying thank you cards, buying nice paper to print your resume on, buying a nice little pad folio to take notes during the conference. On-site, your biggest expenses are going to be your hotel and your food, and then getting there if you're traveling from far away. And then post-conference, you're going to have to pay, generally speaking, for travel to on-campus visits, which includes flight and sometimes hotel and food, depending on the school that you're visiting. So my best advice there is to set a budget for those three big chunks, the pre-interview, the on-site costs, and the post-interview costs. Just know that you're going to have expenses in each of those categories, and just invest your money where you feel you need to invest the most money. So for me, when I was coming out of graduate school, I didn't have a good suit. I didn't have much of any good clothing because I was on a tight budget. And so that's where I plunked down a lot of my money, was making sure that I looked professional and appropriate at the conference. And then while I was on site, definitely pool your resources. If you're traveling with a cohort or if you know people from other schools that are attending, there's no shame in bunking 3 to 4 to 5 people in a hotel room. Again, like Anne-Marie said, as long as you're taking care of yourself and you're getting good sleep and staying healthy while you're there at the conference. And then as far as food goes, that's generally where I see a lot of people spending a lot of money when they're traveling. So for me, a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and a little snack bag of Doritos and chips, that was enough to get me through. But I definitely say pool your resources. And I know there's a hashtag for this webinar. Use social media to connect with people who are going to the conference who might be riding solo. Maybe they're at a smaller school, they don't have a cohort. Try to connect with people electronically because again, that lodging is a significant expense if you're staying 4 or 5 nights on site and then going to the conference afterwards. There's a big investment there. But just set a budget and do your best to stick to it. But also understand that you need to spend this money because it's an investment in your future.
Yeah, one thing I would share is I wrote a blog post a couple weeks ago. It's on the Placement Exchange website called Bills, Bills, Bills. What would Beyonce do? Getting your TPE on-site budget on fleek. And a lot of the points that were just made were very similar. But I want to go a little bit deeper on the point that was just made about clothing. One of the ways that you can manage your stress and feel your best is when you look and feel the part. And so that's going to take you investing in that wardrobe. And it's not about buying the $1,000 suit. It's about one word, and that word is tailoring. And so I recently did a session where I asked how many people in the room were currently feeling uncomfortable because one piece of their clothing did not fit. And about 80 people stood up. You want to be comfortable while you're there, and you also want to be professional. So think about investing in yourself in terms of your wardrobe. You can buy a $60 suit at TJ Maxx, get it tailored for $100, and it feels like a $1,000 suit. So that can be one thing that you can really do that will make you feel better and is a good investment in yourself.
I cannot tell you, thank you so much for saying that, Anne-Marie, because I can't tell you how important it is. The tailoring, I'm going to just say it again because it is very noticeable as an employer when someone is uncomfortable with what they're wearing. And looking like your clothing is ill-fitting makes not only you uncomfortable, but it's the person interviewing you is also aware of that. So it's just something to be thoughtful of. 100%, I'm so glad you said that. The other thing I would say is shoes. Women or men who want to wear high heels at TPE, if you are not someone who can rock high heels on your everyday life, I would say to avoid the heels. You can look good and look tailored in a pair of low heels the same way you would in high, but if you're not walking with confidence or not able to walk the way you normally would, it is definitely a detriment. It also makes you also so uncomfortable. So when you're talking about investing, invest in shoes and the clothing that will make you look the part. I agree.
Yes.
On that same point, this is a great opportunity to utilize your career services offices on your campuses. They're in the business of helping people prepare to look professional, to do things with interviews. They might have some resources, some guidance, some avenues to different places in and around your city or your town or your university or college that can help you prepare for that aesthetic. And it's really important to look professional, look comfortable, and as an employer who's probably sat across from about 200 to 300 different candidates, I remember folks from what they say, not what they look like. And if I do remember what you looked like, that's usually not a good thing. Look comfortable, look professional, do not look remarkable. And I mean by that is oftentimes people want to personalize, and I absolutely believe you need to be yourself. But if you're looking to really put on a look or to go to one extreme or another, because you want to make sure that it becomes a fit issue and you want the employer to know, well, this is who I am. Be confident with that, but don't necessarily make that be the only thing that they remember about you. Okay? The next question, thank you all for that, that's great advice. The next question, recognizing that placement conferences are tough work, how can a candidate also enjoy the experience?
I think it's a really interesting question. Some people might say, am I supposed to enjoy it? And I think you are. For many of you, you're finishing degrees, and this is the culmination of your success in trying to find that first important job. A couple things I would say. There are roundtables that happen all during the day at TPE. Myself and about 10 other people at TPE conduct roundtables every hour on the hour on different topics. Things like acing the second round interview, what to do when you get on campus, how to negotiate the offer. So if you have some downtime, come to those sessions to learn and to meet other people. There can be a lot of solidarity in the room when you're meeting other folks who are going through the exact same thing as you. Our group of 10 is also coaching on site at TPE. So we coach the mid-level and the entry-level folks. So you'll see us standing around with name tags, and we're happy to chat with you to process through an interview and to talk about strategies for your next one. So definitely utilize us in that kind of way. I think it's also important to remember that everyone there wants you to succeed. And if there's one thing that you have to say in your head every day, it's that same sentence. Everyone here wants me to succeed. And finally, we know that the number one thing that people are looking at in terms of hiring a candidate is this twofold approach of, do you have the skills to do the job, and do I want to take you to lunch? And while I recognize it's much more complicated than that, it comes down to the fact that, do I trust that you're going to be able to make good decisions to take care of our students, and do I find you likable enough to work with our staff? And so as you think about how to prepare, those are the kinds of things you need to think about. How am I putting forth my best self? How am I demonstrating who I am? And how can I show what I've done in the past and how it can benefit the next university?
Well said.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is there's generally like a newcomers meeting that just orients you to the conference itself. Go to that and shake hands and kiss babies and meet people. The people that you'll see at TPE are generally speaking going to be the people that you'll see the rest of your career at conferences. You may cross paths working in the same state. It's an awesome experience to just make friends and begin building your professional network if you're coming out of graduate school. But then I would also say definitely enjoy the city. Going back to the finance question just a second ago, you can see things cheaply, and there are websites where you can go explore the city. You don't have to spend a dime, but definitely get out of your hotel room, get out of the interview rooms, the interview tables, and just go explore a little bit. But definitely use this time to start building your professional network.
Another resource that we haven't brought up quite yet is the candidate resource room, and that's where a lot of candidates will find themselves in between interviews, writing thank you notes, possibly grabbing that quick bite and that quick snack. That's where the coaching that Anne-Marie referenced will be taking place. It is one of the more dynamic spaces during TPE. I've seen amazing collegial camaraderie types of environment created each and every year. So make sure you find your way there. It's typically close to where mailboxes are, and so you're going to have access to that. There's no shame in sitting there for a couple of hours if you have that time and communicating with other candidates to share the experience, much like our panelists have shared. So definitely take advantage of that resource. And one of the things that I should also mention is a lot of those things that we've referenced before on that packing list. We have a lot of supplies in that candidate resource room that can support you if you happen to not have that Band-Aid. If you happen to not have, if you have a wardrobe malfunction, we often have things that can also help fix those pieces. So just ask any of the TPE staff, and they're going to be wanting to do whatever they can to support you. Our next question, what should the common tell us about yourself include and not include?
That one used to be so hard for me, and then I just started talking, and that's kind of where my advice comes from, is that the folks you're interviewing with have your resume, they've read it, that it's our job to be well prepared in that role, in the hiring role. And so they've read your cover letter, they've read your resume, they have reviewed it. Trust that they have, and my biggest don't is not to rehash it. When someone asks you to tell you about yourself or tell you how you got there or why, that sort of thing, that's my biggest advice, not to replay it. It's a wasted opportunity to let them get to know you and a little bit about yourself, because going back to what Anne-Marie said, you are definitely looking for someone who has the skills to do that job or who is coachable, that you can teach to do the intricacies of your specific campus, but you also need that person to be able to have the conversation, and an easy conversation, and build rapport pretty quickly with students. That's one of the things you're looking for, and if that's your opportunity to begin building that rapport with the people who are interviewing you. Talk about the why, in terms of the why you chose to go into the field. You don't have to go through the what all the things were that led you there, or what the things were, where the places you went to school, those sorts of things, the roles you've held. The why is a piece if you're bringing that in. What's something fun that you like to do, something that you're good at? That's also something. I love hearing that about people. I've had then during a second interview, it's a great opportunity to bring that up, because you may have a little more time, you may have a little more flexibility with that. And I had a whole conversation about guilty pleasure television with a candidate that I'll never forget that candidate, because that's how they opened up with, this is the guilty pleasure television show I like. And what do you like about your experiences in the field so far? So the positivity in terms of thinking positive about what you've gleaned from experiences, not necessarily what those experiences have been, but what you have gleaned and what your value add could be to them, while letting them know who you are as a person. That just is my biggest thing. It's a wasted opportunity if you just go back to the resume.
All good points. The only other thing I would probably add is that a lot of entry-level folks do one kiss of death thing with this question, and it's that they go too long. And so when you test out your answer to this question, 60 seconds, maybe 90. But that's as long as you can go. So when I do a lot of practice phone interviews with candidates, I just hang up the phone after 90 seconds. They learn quickly. But the fact is that nobody loves your story as much as you do. So it's important to have it in short sound bites that get to the point, that help them understand it, but that it isn't like, here's my life story. So we've often seen candidates who will talk about that first question for 5 to 7 minutes, when really they should already be on question 3 or 4.
Yep. You guys can't see me right now, but I'm standing up in my room clapping and cheering for Anne-Marie, because I could not agree more with what she said. This is generally going to be an opening question from employers, but it's not the only question they want to ask you. and I have had candidates go as long as 10 to 12 minutes on this question, and it's it's a mood killer. We want to get to know about you. We want to see if it's a good fit. I want to learn, again, what your guilty pleasures are, what kind of TV you like, what do you do with your free time. I don't need to know from the day you were born to today everything that you've accomplished or done, because I can see that on your resume. So definitely 60 to 90 seconds, I think, is a good time frame.
I think as a summary point, the options is that you're going to ultimately tell us about yourself during the rest of your answers. You're going to be able to showcase through the examples that all of our panelists have spoken about to tell us about yourself, and so not to beleaguer the point right out of the gate. Even though that might help break your ice, be prepared for the fact that that 90-second soundbite is about as much as you want to give. So I think that's all fantastic advice. Thank you. And then finally, what is one more piece of advice from each of you that you have for candidates to flourish at TPE?
Yeah, I'm going to get us started on this one, and I have two pieces of advice. One is be yourself, and I know that sounds very cliche, but as employers, we understand that you're in interview mode and that you want to put your best foot forward, but feel free to infuse your personality into the interview setting, into your interactions away from the interview table, because you will bump into people that you've interviewed with throughout the conference. But just feel free to be yourself and show the employers who you are, because at the end of the day, we're all looking for fit. You need to find a school that you fit with, and would like to find staff members that fit within our organizations. And then to a point that Anne-Marie said about your number one school when you get there may not be your number one when you leave, I would just say keep an open mind and get rid of any preconceptions you have about schools. When I was coming out, I went to school in the southeastern part of the United States, and when I was coming out, I said, there was one state in the Southeast I did not want to work in, absolutely did not want to work in that state. And I got an interview request from a school in that state, and that's it. That ended up being the job that I took. I got to the table, and I loved the people, I loved the school. So just be open-minded and get rid of any, pre-rankings you have in your head, because you could get to that table and realize that you're not a fit for that number one school that you thought.
100% agree with that one. I have a very similar story to that, so that's great advice. I have two other pieces of advice because I know we'll get to some questions, things like that. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, make sure you are meeting your needs and taking care of yourself. Eat. You must eat real food, not crap. Things bring snacks with you throughout the day. Well, the candidate room will have everything you need, staplers, all that good stuff. You know what you can eat and what will take care of your body. Please make sure that you are doing that to keep yourself and your energy up throughout the day. They're long days. Energy is really important to maintain. And my only other one is I'm going to bring up alcohol. So I have seen candidates make the mistake, and I think it is a mistake, of forgetting that you are interviewing. And it's not fun, it's not good, but you're interviewing the whole time that you are in Indianapolis. So you will, whether it's in the mornings when you're working out in the gym, or whether it's at night when you're out with your cohort, or whether it's at NASPA, because folks will stay for the conference who are interviewing you, or members of their organizations will stay and will be a part of those. And if you're doing something that you wouldn't do in front of those people already, then I would check yourself. So that's one of my biggest advice, is check yourself when it comes to alcohol, check yourself when it comes to the social situations, because there are socials that happen during TP, which are great opportunities for people and for you to get to know more people in an organization, for you to get to know people in more of a where your guard is down and less of a uptight atmosphere that TP can sometimes be in the interview table. It does allow for that, but I urge you to check yourself and to really consider that entire time that you are there, you are interviewing.
I have a few as well. I would say, well, Taylor, but we already covered that. The next is don't be snarky on social media. I mean, period. but especially don't do it during the job search time. People are looking over those hashtags all day, directors, deans, VPs, and I've seen people be really excited about a candidate and see something that they put on social media during TPE and not be excited about that candidate. So just be careful about that. Over-prepare before TPE. There is no reason why you should be doing homework at TPE on these schools. It should be all done before. Don't box yourself in. We talked about that a little bit. And finally, to remember that when you get a no from a school, it's not a no, it's a not now. And so I had a dream school when I came to my first placement exchange. They were awesome. We totally vibed in the first interview. I was so excited. I walked down to my mailbox right after the interview, and the rejection letter was already in the box. And I was like, what happened? And I was like, oh, there goes my chance to ever work there. 6 years later, I was the assistant director for Res Ed at DePaul University in Chicago, and that's a school that rejected me within 4 seconds. So just remember that a no is not a no, it's a not now.
Well, those are all great pieces of advice. But the last one I would offer is do your best to look alive and engaged while you interview. If that means where you position yourself on a chair, if that means using your eyes, using your hands, doing your best to stay engaged during the interview, even if you feel like the employers are not paying attention. Trust me, they are. They might be taking notes. They're listening to you. Granted, it might be the end of the day. Everybody might be tired. You might even all break the ice by saying, boy, we're really tired, and that might actually help the interview move along a little bit better. But try to go in with as much gusto at your 4 p.m. interview as you did at your 9 o'clock. And that sometimes just means about how you position yourself while you're interviewing. It's always nice to have someone energized at the end of the day that engages us as employers, and that helps reinvigorate, rejuvenate us into having a great conversation, a great experience with a candidate. Well, those are our prepared questions. We have had some additional questions submitted, and I encourage others, if they would like, to submit some different questions to continue to use that question pane. I will go ahead and begin the first one. From an employer's perspective, can you share some examples of good questions to ask at the end of your interview? So basically, when the question is, so do you have any questions for us, what are some good questions that a candidate might offer? And that's from Robert. And Robert, if I got that incorrectly, please correct me with another question.
Robert, good questions are about being specific. So do not ask what do you like about working here? What's your favorite thing about this school? I mean, that could be applied to any school. What I love are the questions that show me that you've done your homework. So remember how in the beginning I talked about see if you can check out their school newspaper to find out what's happening on campus? You could say something like, I recently saw that you're building a student union on campus, or a new student union. How do you think that might impact community on your campus? That is very specific. That is not immediately found on the website, and it speaks to a broad notion of community, which most jobs that you're applying for will also touch on. And so I want to see that you've done the homework, because when I hear very general questions, I'm assuming you just booked 20 interviews and you're just kind of grasping at straws. And so I would make sure that when you do your homework, the questions come from that, and you're able to tell the difference.
I 100% agree with that advice. I also would add, do some self-reflection before you get on a plane or in a car to get to TPE. Really think about what are the things that you need to know about each of the schools that you're interviewing with to make your decision, because you are interviewing folks as much as they're interviewing you, and you are looking for that fit. So what are the things that will make a place that you want to go to? And so what are the questions that you need to know from those places that will help you gain that information? Absolutely, that also shows having to do your research, because if you ask them a question that is evident and they've already given you that information, that to me is like absolutely unprepared too, because I've already given you that information. And a lot of schools will share information with you early. So please be thoughtful about yourself and what you need to know, because the next step could be bringing you to campus, and if you haven't yet made up your mind, if you're accepting an on-campus interview and you haven't already made up your mind that that's a place that you could actually see yourself, and you have those enough questions answered to at least be able to say this is a possibility, then you're doing yourself and them a huge disservice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That is, when it's handed over to you, it's your chance to interview the interviewers. And so definitely have questions prepared, 3 to 4 questions You won't have a ton of time at the end, generally speaking, to ask a lot of questions. But one of the best questions I ever got from a candidate was about the students at our particular campus at the time. And the question was, what is something that your students have that they don't want, and what is something that your students want but they don't need?
That's
And so
great.
that put me on the spot, and it made me think. It was a great question. So the question was, what's something your students have but they don't want, and what's something that they want but they don't need? And so, from the employer side, I love for candidates to ask thought-provoking questions. That tells me a lot about you as a candidate, and it just helps me learn a little bit more about you, and then also help us as an institution answer the question why. I love being able to answer, why do you do this a certain way, or why that? Starting with why is a great way to ask questions.
And this is a good point to point out that because this is your opportunity to interview the employers, this is a time to make sure that you're paying attention to the time that you're using in your own responses to questions to make sure that you do have that little bit of time for that one or two questions that you might have had prepared. Now, granted, if your interview's gone so well and it's been engaging and you don't get to them, then no harm, no foul. You might be able to get to them if you're invited for a second interview, but try and make sure that as you prepare your responses, you're being mindful. If it's a half-hour interview a slot, it's typically going to be about 20, 25 minutes of questions from them, and then offering you an opportunity for those few minutes to ask them before they begin their next interview. So it's a good point. If you have some killer questions that you want to ask folks that you've done some research on, be mindful of that to hopefully that you'll get to them through your own responses being timely. Thank you all for responding to Robert's question. We have another question from Crystal. How should you prepare if you are a working professional with a master's in higher ed, attending that currently you do not have a job in higher education? So you're a working professional, you have a degree in higher ed, but you don't currently have a job in higher ed now.
Sure. So just so I understand the question, so has the master's, just not employed right now, correct?
Has the master's, is working but not working in higher education.
Great. Okay, and so I'm going to take it from the lens of if they're going to TPE, which I'm assuming this person is. Is that a safe assumption?
I think so.
Okay, great. What I would say about that is it is about both your previous experience and your transferable skills. So when I think about what is needed to work in student activities, to be a hall director, to work in orientation, it's not about the fact that you have to have done that before. It's about the fact that you can show me that you truly understand what the position is asking for, and that you can share with me times that you've done those kinds of things. So I'm not one who gets overly focused on this path has to look exactly this way, but I do have to see that your story makes sense when you explain it to me, and I understand where the transferable skills come from. So when you look at a position, say to yourself, what's the 3 things this job is really asking me to do? For example, is it asking you to community build, program, and advise? If that's the case, then have questions and answers prepared that demonstrate how you're able to do exactly those 3 things.
Yeah, and an awesome response. I would say, I can't remember who mentioned confidence and being confident at the interviewing table, but be confident in whatever answers you're giving. Like Emery said, you have a story, and as an employer, I want to know the story, the path that you've been on. I don't know what the gap is between when you graduated and where you are currently, but I'd love to know what path you've been on, what you've learned, and then why you want to come back, and what you have to give to the profession. And again, those transferable skills, you have to explain, what you're currently doing, how that translates to what you want to do. But I wouldn't say at all that puts you at a disadvantage. I think you're just going to have to work a little bit harder to share your story, because it's like Anne-Marie said, there's no particular path of A, B, C gets you to D. I would want to hear your story and what you have to share.
I don't have anything further to say except that I think there are a lot of employers out there who don't want the typical path, or who aren't hung up on the typical path. There is no typical path. If you ask a lot of people in this field, their path is not the bam, bam, bam sort of path, and that's okay, and it's actually more than okay. I think being able to explain those skills and what you can do makes you even better, even more coachable.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question comes from Alexander. And he's put, my apologies if this is a dumb question, but I was wondering if you could clarify how the TPE process works. Do you need to apply to the job on the employer's actual HR page, or can you just contact them through the TPE page to see about setting up an interview, or do you do both? Apparently, shout out to Oregon State Beaver and Marie. I'll answer that for you real quickly, Alexander. Typically, you do not have to apply to the HR website in order to secure an interview through TPE. Individual schools may require that as a part of their process, you also apply as a candidate within their pool in their HR process. And then some ask you to do that should you make it to the point of being an on-campus candidate. So utilize the system, the TPE system. You can, as a candidate, you can register, as you registered as a candidate, you can set up an interview, let the institution dictate to you, and it's their responsibility at that point to tell you if you need to apply through their HR website prior to having a TP engagement with them. So it's going to be institutional. It's not necessarily a mandate one way or the other. Next question from Anja, do you have any advice for mid-level candidates?
For me, mid-level candidates, again, talking about confidence, being able to go in and really speak to your experiences, being comfortable, I go back to self-reflection a lot, but being comfortable and very well now and having a great knowledge and a great way to communicate the experiences that you have gained in your roles will be the best tool that you have. You and your contacts, the people that you have met along the way, whether it's in organizations, things like that, those folks can help you. But really being able to rely on those experiences, and this is for everybody, but at a mid-level role, you hopefully when you're in this entry-level role, you're pulling in as much as you can and trying to gain experiences in lots of different areas. That's one of the things that will help you in your next role. So I always think your best tool is to really do some writing, do some, whatever it is that helps you kind of reflect on what it is you've done. Those are the things that really have stood out to me when I'm asking questions of a mid-level person. What are the things that you name the experience, own the experience, and be really confident in what it is?
Yeah, and I think you have to also understand that the role of mid-level has changed a lot, I think. I don't know if you agree with that, Chris and Mary, but over the last 5 to 10 years, there used to be, 3 or 4 assistant or associate directors in a department, and now there might be 1 or 2. And so it is definitely a more competitive landscape. Also, the old idea of I'll be entry-level for 3 years and then I'll move up just doesn't exist anymore. Not that it doesn't happen ever, but mostly you're looking at 5 to 7 years in entry before people are getting selected for mid, although certainly not always. I think what you have to remember about mid-level is when you're in the mid-level, you're in the sandwich, meaning like you're the meat. You have to try to do your best to supervise and advocate for your entry-level staff while really pushing forward the agenda of your director or your senior-level staff person. It's a hard place to be. And so when I'm hiring mid-level people, I want to see that they get that they get that they're going to have to be responsible for managing the day-to-day, the people they supervise, and promoting the vision of their supervisor. I want to see that they know what it means to take a leadership role. So at entry level, a lot of times, we're like, oh, they're new, they're entry. I want to see that you have done some thought about how you will lead in this mid-level way. So demonstrate to me those experiences you've had at entry level and how that impacts your leadership ability at mid.
Absolutely. It's all about scope. Mid-level positions are about graduating in one shape or another and providing perspective on scope and growth in your own personal development as an employee, as a practitioner, as a scholar, however you choose to term yourself. And as Anne-Marie noted, the mid-level ranks continue to expand as far as time in it. So you might believe that you're ready for mid-level, or you might feel you're ready to be out of mid-level, or you might change into a different institution and you might still be considered mid-level. But don't let that be a stigma. Mid-level are the meat and bones, as she said as well, to how we get anything done in student affairs. Thank you for all that. Next question, if I have pets, when should I let schools know? during a first interview, second, third? How do I know if they are pet friendly? I don't want to waste anyone's time. And this I'm for a housing professional.
That's a great question. When I was coming out of graduate school, I was engaged to be married, and my fiance had a cat and a dog, and those ended up being deal breakers for me. And a lot of schools don't publish their pet policies on the front end, so that was always one of my questions. I was up front with it when it was time for me to ask questions. I would say, listen, here's my situation. I'm inheriting these pets, which are still alive, unfortunately. I don't like either of them, but that's my issue. And I was up front because I also didn't want to waste anybody's time if I knew that that was a deal breaker for me. And if they didn't have a pet policy that was friendly, then unfortunately I couldn't work at that school, and I had to make some sacrifices, which I was happy to do, and turn down schools I was interested in because of that policy. But I would definitely ask. It may seem selfish and strange to ask that up front, but if that's a deal breaker for you, then that's part of who you are.
All right, next question. Should we bring resumes or cover letters to the interview? And that's from Caitlin.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sorry. I would generally say no. I don't think it's necessary. I might bring a few with you in case a new job posts on site at TPE that didn't post on the website earlier that you might be interested in. But generally, I don't think, schools have all of your materials. I don't know. Mary, Chris, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I agree totally. I think you can always print off your resume, bring it on a drive, or email it to yourself. Like in the candidate room, there are tons of computers and printers. I don't expect the fancy paper or things like that. It's just not a part of kind of what it is. Most things are electronic. If you needed your resume, then I agree. If there's a new job that pops up, you can always just print it out. I don't think it's necessary.
I totally agree 100% as well. We have all your materials already printed out, so save yourself the time and effort.
All right. Let me get to the next question. Sorry. Let's see. Trying to get to the next one. I'm getting some comments. I've noticed on the schedule that there are socials listed. Can you talk more about that and what you would recommend to prepare for them if we have to?
I love socials. Socials are an opportunity to be able to meet additional people on the team. So let's say you had a strong first round interview and you got an invite to a social. The first question I always get is this optional? And if you like the school and you're really interested, the answer is no. You should be going, and when you head in there, some people say, well, then what do I do when I get there? I'm not going to know a ton of people. What I might do is casually go over to the person who interviewed you, say hello, introduce yourself again, say it was so nice to talk to you, have a little conversation, and then either they or you can say, can I have an opportunity to meet the other people on your team? And they can walk you around and introduce you to other people. And so you don't have to stay forever. It's not like you have to be there for an hour. But even giving 15 minutes of your time, meeting a few people, showing up, it shows the school that you're interested in them. So if it's a school that you are interested in, I would say absolutely go to the social.
100% agree. I think you notice who's not there and who's there.
To get some clarification, apparently we have some chatter on Twitter, which is great, but some of the comments that are being made we might want to clarify or give some response to. One, the fact that not everyone technically does get a job. In fact, there are some grads that might even still be searching now who are not recent grads, but maybe even grads from this past May. And how do we want to maybe respond to that? And the fact that it is in fact a competition. Do you all have any comments towards those two points?
Yeah, and that was my bad for using the Oprah analogy, that everybody does get a job, and I apologize for that. Yes, you are correct. There are people that leave TPE and other job search, job placement opportunities without an opportunity, and it is a competition. You're competing with your friends and cohort members. The only thing I would say is, in mentoring candidates who were unsuccessful at placement exchanges, I would say one of their downfalls was being a little too specific in the job search and having to have all 10 or 12 criteria met for them to apply for a job, and they only interviewed with 3 or 4 schools there and didn't end up with something. So I apologize for making that comment. I'm sorry for the confusion, but you are correct. Not everybody does get a job. I was just being a little bit funny, so I'm sorry.
I think that's a great response. And also with relationship to the competition, sure, it's a competition, but I think it's important to remember to not compete with others so much as compete with yourself. How do you make yourself better prepared? How do you make yourself communicate more clearly? How do you compete with yourself to make you the best candidate you can be? And don't just get locked into competing with that other colleague or cohort member or anyone else for that matter and how successful they're being. Compete with yourself to make sure you're being as successful as you can be. So yeah, in essence, yes, it's a competition. People might be vying for the same positions. And so obviously that's a competition, but focus on the fact that it's a competition with yourself.
Yeah, I think the competition piece is real. It's just owning, like figuring out who, the comparison is not helpful. Comparing yourself to other people, not helpful. Owning that there are other people going for a job that you would like can be healthy, can be like motivating for you, but your response to that competition is absolutely your choice, and absolutely how you respond to that could mean the answer between whether you are walking out with a job and whether you're not. So it's just an attitude thing, and attitude's important.
I also think there's something to be said for geographic flexibility. And so
Totally.
I think the more geographically flexible you are, the less the chance of you feeling like you're not going to get a job exists. And so not that you can't have preferences, but for many of the people on this call who are in their 20s, there is no reason why you couldn't consider doing something different, even for a little bit. So when I help my grad students here at NYIT who are interested in pursuing higher ed, I make a deal with them. I will help them every step of the way to get into a graduate program as long as they don't go to any school in New York or New Jersey, because it's very important for them to get out of what they've known and to try something different. And so I give that same advice to you. If you're geographically flexible, you will have plenty of options. If you say, I can only live in Florida, there will be some options. So I would say, how can you position yourself so that you have the greatest possibility to get a job, and that's being geographically flexible.
And that goes along the same lines with being vocationally flexible. I mean, if you are focused on being in student activities, we all kind of look at the numbers and you'll see them as jobs are posted. 80 to 85% will be in housing. Are you prepared to do that? Maybe you find a job that includes an activities piece at a smaller university or college. Is there an internship or something that you did in your graduate program that maybe, I could do that for a little while, and you might learn something that can better inform your practice in another area. So if you don't get that first round bite or that first round good feel, open yourself up to some different options, not even just geographically, but vocationally as well. Thank you. Great responses. Another question from Karen. How do you manage your negotiables, non-negotiables as you approach TPE?
I think you only get two non-negotiables. This is my own opinion. But I think that if you have more than that, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So when I was working in Chicago, again, after being rejected from DePaul years and years before, I decided that I wanted to look for a job, and I had two non-negotiables. One, I wanted to be the director of a large department with a large staff, and two, I wanted to live in a place where people voted like me. So I had one personal non-negotiable and one professional one. I think it gets tricky when you say, here are the 5 things I have to have. So going back to a previous question, maybe one of your non-negotiables if you're in housing is that they have to have a pet policy. Cool. But that doesn't mean that you get to have 4 other ones. You limit yourself too much. And the more that you limit yourself, the more you can't be open to different opportunities. So I think you have to say to yourself, what are the 1 or 2 things that you really have to have, and go from there.
Agreed. Don't make the decision to limit yourself. And if you are, then own the fact that you are the one limiting yourself.
Yeah, those are all great points. I don't have anything to add to that.
Very good. The second interview is coveted. Can you please speak on the most effective ways for multidimensional mid-level candidates to highlight their expertise and cross-cultural professional skills? And that's from Marlene.
Well, the first thing I'd say to that is not every school does a second interview on site at TPE. For me, for example, every school I've been at where I've recruited employees, I only do a 30-minute initial interview. And for me, that's enough time to glean information about you and the potential fit with the institution. And so I never offered second interviews. But to your question, I have been involved in second interviews from a candidate perspective, and they're generally longer. You may have a 45-minute to an hour chunk of time in a second interview, and you may get asked some of the same questions, but just be prepared to go a little bit more in depth with your answers, share a little bit more about yourself and your story, and just be prepared to ask more questions from your side.
Yes, and I think the second round interview is more example focused. The first is our team liked you vibed with us. And the second is more about now let's see what examples you have for us. So the things like tell us about a time where you made a mistake, or tell us about your weaknesses. I just don't want to hear the fake answers. I don't want to hear that I delegate too much or I care too much, right? Be honest. If you're impatient, say it. Say, I've really had to work on my own personal patience, and here are some strategies that I have used in order to get better in this area. I'll take an honest person all day long over the, I really struggle to delegate. So think about that second interview time as a place for you to give some concrete examples and to be real with your answers.
Yeah, 100% agree. A lot of times the second interview can be set up as more of a conversation piece also, where your questions will play more of a highlighted role. So it's just another opportunity for you to take what you learned in that first interview and ask maybe more in-depth questions, maybe more questions about that start with, here's how I do this, what do you do, that sort of thing. But the behavioral questions, the example questions, that's what a second interview is about.
Great advice, and Marlene, more connected to some of your specifics with cross-cultural professional skills. You're in charge of your answers. Even if it's where you make a mistake or where you've excelled, that's your opportunity. If those are important areas for you to communicate, to share those areas of specificity that you want to make sure the employers know about you and that you're most confident and feel like you have the strongest areas of competence, especially if you feel that it's an area of emphasis for them as employers as well. Well, thank you all for your additional questions, and thank you very much to the panelists. Just a few kind of final comments. If you have colleagues who are not able to join us today, this webinar will be posted to our TPE YouTube channel in the next couple of days for their review. Also, we have 5 more webinars coming up actually in the next 5 weeks, and you can see them here getting ready to interview, which will go a little bit more in depth to preparing for the TP interview, preparing for the campus interview, take your resume to the next level. That'll be our second offering, what to expect your first 90 days in a position, and then also a second offering of getting ready to interview. We know those are popular topics. If you haven't already, please be sure to register as a candidate with TPE so that you can begin interacting with potential employers on positions and prepare to flourish at TPE. We will also be soon offering a registration for our boot camp program, which happens the day prior to TPE beginning, and that's a small program offered to folks who want to get that extra little bit of preparation from some different people. We'll offer some mock interviewing, some investigation into researching and understanding institutions, and some different pieces. We'll also be publishing our list of the on-site roundtables that Anne-Marie referenced earlier today, and we're really excited about those topics and the really experienced professionals that we have. So with that, thank you again to our panelists for taking the time to share with us their experience and their expertise, and we wish you all the best as you prepare for the placement exchange, and we look forward to seeing everyone in Indianapolis in March. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.